Hi, I am Steve Wood, and thanks for joining us on Luke 21. We're studying biblical prophecy. Today we're in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5. We're going to take a special focus on verse 3, where it says, peace and security. It's one of the signs of the day of the Lord. In order to get the context of 1 Thessalonians 5:3, I'm going to read the first few verses of this chapter. But as to the times and the seasons, brethren, you have no need to have anything written to you, for you yourselves know well that the day of the Lord will come like a thief in the night, when people say there is peace and security. Then sudden destruction will come upon them, as travail comes upon a woman with child, and there will be no escape. But you are not in darkness, brethren, for that day to surprise you like a thief. For you are all sons of light and sons of the day. We are not of the night or of darkness. 1 Thessalonians chapter 5 and verse 3 is often ignored by a lot of people in broadcast and podcast talking about biblical prophecy, and especially during times of war or threats of war. Now, war is perhaps one of the most serious things that human beings engage in, and we're looking at the news. I look fairly carefully at the news, at the conflict between Ukraine and Russia. And people on both sides are talking about whether or not to use nuclear weapons or in what circumstances they will be used. And that concerns me a whole lot. I probably am one of the few people, other than weapons inspectors and communists, who have been near a Russian intercontinental ballistic missile that was pointed at the United States. It's a long story for another day. But I'm concerned about these things. But this is what's going to happen if you hear that the Ukraine conflict and NATO gets behind Ukraine and gets in a war with Russia. Everybody's going to come out and declare, okay, the second coming of Christ, the day of the Lord, is right here, right now. This is about to occur. And they make a big mistake in making this declaration. It's not that wars aren't serious. I probably take war a whole lot more serious than a lot of people, but it is not necessarily the sign of the second coming. And the mistake is made by those who delve into biblical prophecy. They ignore two key scriptures. The first scripture they ignore, by the way, is Jesus himself. In Matthew 24, starting in verse 6, verses 6, 7, and 8, are critical verses to remember. Just write a Post-it note somewhere in your house. Put it in a closet. Don't scare your kids. But if war breaks out, read these verses. Here it is. Matthew 24, 6. And when you hear of wars and rumors of wars, see that you are not alarmed. Now, this is Jesus Christ speaking. The disciples asked Jesus, what will be the signs of your coming? And he says, when you hear wars and rumors of war, don't be alarmed, because the end is not yet. It's the dead opposite of what you will hear if war happens to break out in Europe between the European nations and Russia. Jesus says, when you hear wars and rumors of wars, see that you are not alarmed, for this must take place, but the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All this is but the beginnings of birth pangs. Birth pangs. Let's see, where did we hear that? 1 Thessalonians chapter 5. St. Paul uses two illustrations to talk about the suddenness of Jesus' coming in the day of the Lord. One, he'll come like a thief, or it will be when birth pangs suddenly come upon a woman expecting a child. Then the second scripture is our scripture today from 1 Thessalonians 5. And again, St. Paul says, when people say there is peace and security, then sudden destruction will come upon them. Now, in our last episode, I tried to emphasize as strong as I possibly could, we don't know the date of the second coming. And people with calculators figuring out certain computations from Daniel and stuff like that and Revelation, and they'll come up with dates where it'll be between this year and the next year. We don't know that, but we do know that there will be certain signs that saying this might be the era of when it's coming. And simply hearing of wars, because wars have gone on, that's almost the history of humanity. We can't tell what's coming, but Jesus tells us what to expect, and it's not wars and rumors of wars. St. Paul says it's actually declarations of peace and security. Think about this. It's the dead opposite that you usually hear from so-called prophecy experts. And watch, when the war escalates between Russia and Ukraine, everybody will come out and say, this is the end. And they'll be quoting Ezekiel 38 and 39 and ignoring Revelation 20, which talks about Gog and Magog in New Testament fulfillment. So how could this work out? Now, what I'm about to give you is not a prophecy. It's simply a hypothetical scenario, how what St. Paul is talking about could possibly take place in the modern world. Let's say the European-Russian war goes nuclear. And that would be perhaps one of the most alarming and destructive and appalling things ever to occur in human history. It'd be the worst. And besides the deaths that would come from that, there would be unimaginable suffering, probably runaway inflation, food shortages, financial collapse, chaos among governments. And so the solution to war, remember, war is not the end. It must happen, but the end is not yet. Don't be alarmed. When you want to get alarmed is when people think, those wars between nations are finally over. And there will be a worldwide response. Again, this is strictly hypothetical. A worldwide response that would seek to dilute national sovereignties and instead erect some type of world government, one world government. And that world government would promise peace and security. And perhaps, just by way of illustration, the nuclear launch codes for all the different nations of the world are turned over to an international organization, and maybe, just maybe, there's some really great benevolent guy who could figure out how to correct the world's financial problems resulting from the nuclear war, how to get religions to coexist in a kind of one world union of religions, and then you have a one world government. And this benevolent guy who seems to have everything under hand suddenly turns vicious against uncompromising Christians who don't swear a loyalty oath to the New World Order, get persecuted. Now, what's all this to say? It's to say that the real problem, the real problem for Christians will arise in the time of peace and security. Now, why in the world would a nation like the United States of America want to turn over its sovereignty to some figure in the United Nations or some new world organization? Why would we want to do that? Well, a nuclear war would cause such a reaction. Look at the reactions in the laws that were passed following 9/11. And you have to just say a nuclear war would magnify that so much, and then you'd have peace and security. And that's when trouble comes, because the genius that would have this peace plan for the world, and that everybody would be relaxed except the sons of light and daughters of light, knowing what would be going on, thinking, wow, we're at peace. The world is finally at peace. And then the Catechism of the Catholic Church has a particular paragraph that I suggest, and I'm not kidding, you should read about 50 times. Not all at once, but over and over again, because if you want a great commentary on 1 Thessalonians, the whole epistle right here at 1 Thessalonians 5, listen. This is section 675. Before Christ's second coming, the church must pass through a final trial that will shake the faith of many believers. The persecution that accompanies her pilgrimage on earth will unveil the mystery of iniquity in the form of a religious deception, offering men an apparent solution to their problems at the price of apostasy from the truth. You see, there has to be such a significant problem among mankind, among the nations of the earth, that when they have an opportunity for an apparent solution, but they have to apostatize from the truth of Christianity, what happens then? The supreme religious deception is that of the Antichrist, a pseudo-Messiah by which man glorifies himself in the place of God and of his Messiah come in the flesh. Now, listen very carefully. It's really important when somebody tells you, pay a lot of attention to this paragraph in the Catechism of the Catholic Church, okay? But when you pay attention to it, you also pay a lot of attention to the scripture references in the footnote for paragraph 675. And two of those scripture references happen to be 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verses 2 and 3, as well as 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verses 4 through 14. These are your critical passages to show you that there are certain things that are going to happen before the second coming that will catch men unawares. Everybody's alarmed when they hear of wars or actually see wars on their big screen TVs. But Jesus says the end is not yet. Don't be alarmed. When you want to get alarmed, when you really want to have your radar for what's happening in biblical prophecy, look when the nations of the world think they have arrived at permanent world peace through a man who is not a Christian, who does not affirm the historic doctrines of Christianity, but basically glorifies himself. He's the religious phony, because Jesus is the Prince of Peace, and apart from him, there will be no peace, but a religious apostasy puts everybody to sleep, the world's back in shape, and then sudden destruction comes. I'm Steve Wood, your host, and thanks for joining me on Luke 21.